Westbalkangräben zu überwinden, sie zuzuschütten, neue Verbindungen zu knüpfen und die 6 Länder enger miteinander zu verbinden. Mein Dank gilt an dieser Stelle zunächst meiner Vorgängerin, die diesen Prozess seinerzeit ins Leben gerufen hat. Ein Prozess, den ich gerne und mit höchster Priorität fortsetze. Nicht zuletzt die Zeitenwende macht deutlich, wie wichtig es ist, dass Europa zusammenwächst. Durch den Berlin-Prozess haben wir, die Länder des westlichen Balkans und die europäischen Partner, gemeinsam neuen Schwung in und für die Region erzeugt. Geleitet von den Prinzipien der Solidarität, der Gleichheit und der Kooperation. Diese Prinzipien haben auch unser Jubiläumstreffen heute geprägt. Ein Treffen, bei dem wir wichtige Fortschritte erreicht haben, die konkret das Leben der Bürgerinnen und Bürger
A meeting at which we have been able to make important progress, which will facilitate the lives of the citizens in the region. To give you one example, the action plan for the common regional market that we have just signed. The 6 countries in this action plan agree on even closer economic cooperation for economic areas that include 17 million inhabitants. It will be helpful, and that is important to me personally, to better coordinate the social and labour standards between the countries in the region and to further facilitate mobility between the countries. A second example is the mobility agreement to enhance the exchange of students. The agreement stipulates that students can study at universities and higher education institutions anywhere in the region. Thus, a generation grows closer together. They live together, they learn together, and they study together. We also agreed a joint declaration today to enhance and closely cooperate our fight against irregular migration and organized crime. We also agreed an action plan on combating plastic waste and an agreement to more quickly implement the Green Agenda for the Western Balkans by 2030, which is supported by Germany through the Regional Climate Partnership between Germany and the Western Balkans, which we agreed last year. 1.5 billion euro have been budgeted for by 2030, and half of that will have been paid out before the end of the year. These are all examples providing proof of how the Berlin process is helpful in concrete terms in overcoming borders between the countries and the people who live there in their minds. How important that is visible day in, day out, every time anew. Even today, conflicts rooted in the past make the cooperation difficult, and we talked about that too today. The dialogue on normalization of relations between Serbia and Kosovo is not developing in a way that is satisfactory. In my exchanges with both parties, I've insisted on them implementing fully their commitments, because this is important for the citizens and for the future of these 2 countries in the European Union. And in other countries too, we have to state that there is a nationalist rhetoric, a divisive rhetoric. This constitutes a danger for the growing together and the coexistence in peace and prosperity, because it is clear that these countries will only be able to accede to the European Union together. The more important is, therefore, the regional initiative to establish good neighbourly relations, which has been passed today by all 6 Western Balkan states. In this initiative, they underline their attempts to bring about reconciliation and to settle conflicts in the spirit of partnership. We've been successful in making headway with CEFTA. This will raise the regional cooperation to a higher level. Germany and the Special Representative of the Federal Government for the Western Balkans, Manuel Sarrazin, have been working hard for more than a year to make this step come about. And I'd like to thank Kosovo to have opened up a border checkpoint for Serb goods on a permanent basis up front. That is a demonstration of the spirit of the Berlin process, to promote the growing together of a region where people are united by much more than divides them. Ladies and gentlemen, we look back to 10 years of the Berlin process, to a success story. I'm determined to continue to write that story of success, and I hope that it will not take another 10 years for all 6 countries to finally become members of the European Union. Thank you. And I'd now like to ask the President of the EU Commission to take the floor.
Everyone, we had a very good meeting. Thank you very much for hosting this meeting here and inviting me, dear Chancellor, lieber Olaf. I was glad to be here to mark the 10th anniversary of the Berlin process. First of all, it was an occasion to look back on a decade of progress with our Western Balkan partners, because the Berlin process has always been the advocate, the architect, and the anchor of a solid bond between us. And we thank you for that. A lot has changed, of course, in 10 years. Times of conflicts, wars, and turmoil have brought new awareness inside the European Union. The awareness that a larger union is also a stronger union, and that it was our responsibility to bring aspiring members closer to us. This is why we have been extending to the Western Balkans the very same solidarity measures that we have taken inside our union. One example is the energy crisis. We have helped Western Balkan households to cope with the high energy costs through our energy support package of 1 billion. We are now building energy infrastructure to make the Western Balkans more energy independent with the 30 billion euros of investment plan. Or another example is our cooperation of civil protection. We all have fought the wildfires of this summer and the recent floods in Bosnia and Herzegovina side by side. And all this practical cooperation has run in parallel with progress on the European path. And this brings me to my second point. It was not the case 10 years ago, but today enlargement is very much at the top of our agenda. When we are looking towards the future, we are looking at a future where all 6 Western Balkan partners are part of our European Union. To get there, I believe we must draw on the lessons of the 2004 enlargement. The first precondition is alignment with our core European values, the respect for democracy and the rule of law. And the second precondition is early economic integration. And this is why the Berlin process plays a key role. It has always been the driving force behind regional economic integration. And so the Berlin process became the promoter of the common regional market, the Western Balkan 6 common regional market. It is essential that this common regional market functions smoothly, because it allows the Western Balkan companies to trade, to innovate, and to create good jobs. And because it brings the region closer to us and the economies closer to our single market. So I very much welcome the agreement found last week with the CEFTA, at the CEFTA level. I welcome in particular that restrictions on exports from Serbia to Kosovo will be lifted. I congratulate both sides on showing such political will, and I congratulate you, Olaf, for Germany's skillful mediation efforts, because this is a very concrete step towards normalization. And I also welcome today the signature of the new action plan for the common regional market. The better the common regional market functions, the better the Western Balkans economies can be, step by step, integrated in our European single market. And this is my third and last point. We needed a bridge between the common regional market and the European single market. And this bridge is our growth plan for the Western Balkans, 6 billion of investment. It is no coincidence that I chose to launch this growth plan last year at the Berlin Process Summit in Tirana. The reason is very simple. The growth plan and the Berlin process are interwoven. With the growth plan, we kind of open the door to specific sectors of the single market. To use this opening, the Western Balkans need to adopt relevant reforms to have a level playing field. And these reforms are in return supported by European investment in each country. And progress is tangible. We asked our partners to develop their own reform agenda, under the growth plan. Today, I'm pleased to report that 5 out of 6 reform agendas will be adopted this week. And this means that payments of 6 billion euros in total of the growth plan can start flowing before the end of the year. This would never have been possible without the Berlin process. So the hard work of the Berlin process is a success story. It is a windy road. We are moving forward, but we are moving forward. And many thanks again for hosting the Berlin process here today.
Anila Schuka, Deutsche Welle, Programs for Europe. Herr Bundeskanzler, Sie haben bei
Chancellor, in your introductory statement, you spoke of a new dynamism, a new dynamic in the process of normalization between Serbia and Kosovo. What is the concrete shape of that dynamic in your eyes, and what steps are decisive in your eyes to achieve progress in this long-lasting conflict? 10 years of the Berlin process, Ms. von der Leyen, this has somehow left behind the impression that this has been a process that has come at the expense of democracy in these countries. Milan Dodik continues to speak about the independence referendum, and Serbia speaks about a partnership with Russia, even though they've invaded Ukraine. Look at the border between the Serbs and the Kosovars. Nationalist actors are being included in this process. Don't you think that the Berlin process might unwillingly strengthen these forces? Shouldn't you not rethink your strategy in order to support, above all, the democratic forces? Thank you for your question. Well, it's obvious, if I may say so, that we're pleased that we have been able to advance the development of the common regional market, that we have reached this agreement. You have attended the ceremony that took place earlier today. For that to happen, Serbia and Kosovo had to create the necessary preconditions, and last but not least, to open up the border. So we've witnessed some development here, and we've also have a number of agreements between both countries, of which we said that we wish both sides to now fully implement what they've agreed. So, you know, what needs to be done has already been discussed by all parties involved. So that is a good point of departure, and we should not leave it at that. But on the basis of what we've discussed and done today, we should benefit from the dynamic that has been generated to achieve further progress. As concerns the region in general, I'd like to say, and this is not only with regard to the two countries you've referred to, but all these countries, all these states that want to be members of the European Union, all these countries that want to be together, should make sure that they don't slow down the process because of bilateral issues. Bilateral issues should remain bilateral, and the accession process runs on the basis of, well, it's merit-based, and this creates an accession process. We will continue to support that process. I think it's fair to say that we have been able to achieve quite a lot with the help of others, but also through our own effort. Its prestige, its commitment that Germany has invested and will continue to invest to ensure that all of the countries here will end up members of the European Union one day. And of course, it is a problem that it takes so long, or has taken so long, as you refer to in your question. It was 20 years ago that the order offer was submitted in Thessaloniki. So you need to show patience time and again to knuckle down. And this makes this Berlin process so important, because it constitutes a clear commitment on the part of everyone, so that people know, well, these people actually have an interest in it, and we can rely on them. And if we do our bit, it will pay off at the end of the day. And I think everyone can rely on this.
Too, that, of course, we have seen during these 20 years a pretty long period where enlargement was not on the top of the agenda and was excluded as a possibility. This has completely changed in the last years. I must also say that Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine has brought clarity. You have to choose to be on the right side of history and on the side of the international law. And all countries applying for EU membership have been very clear on that one and have moved to the side of the democracy and the defense of the international law. And there's a second element that is so important besides the political element, and this is the economic development. We know that one of the success stories within the European Union and enlargement of the European Union was the increase of GDP, the economic growth and prosperity. And this is the reason why, together with the Berlin process, we are now working on this growth plan that opens partially the door already now, before accession, to the single market, so that the fruits of the single market and more trade between the Western Balkan region and the single market already have a positive effect on prosperity in these 6 countries.
Frau Kommissionspräsidentin, Herr
Madam Commission President, Federal Chancellor, I'd like to ask a question pertaining to CEFTA, the Free Trade Agreement. Madam President von der Leyen, in the back, maybe you could elaborate on the practical advantages, because economists say that these 6 countries, due to their economic structure, are so similar that there is no need for an agreement between these countries. Could you elaborate on the concrete and tangible advantages? And the question to both of you, because you mentioned this, the accession date. Federal Chancellor, you said that these 6 countries will only be able to join en bloc, if I understood you correctly, and that it shouldn't take another 10 years for them to be able to accede. So do you think that there will be accessions before 2030? Romania and Bulgaria also joined the Union without fulfilling all necessary conditions. On the agreement that was forged, indeed it is necessary. A lot of things come into play, because it's a bit confusing that the countries which are not that large, which are close together and have more trade amongst with Germany than amongst each other. But yet, indeed, you can generate a lot of additional growth if you reduce the legal barriers which have originated on the way, which provide an obstacle to the free flow of goods and services, and people who want to work in other countries have difficulties of doing so. So you can do away with these barriers, and this is also due to the fact that you need a border infrastructure. So we want to develop infrastructure further so that resources can be further developed. So of course, we want to develop a joint perspective for all, but there will be countries who will have concluded accession talks earlier and fulfill other conditions. We will not hold them back, but everyone needs to know that they belong to a joint future and that you cannot mutually block each other, but in the end, you can create the necessary conditions by your own work to accede.
Important at the CEFTA agreement, the unblocking of the process. Very important is the fact that there is political will to work together. So the psychology behind it is also important. The growth plan actually is very clear that it says you cannot block the others. You have to work on your growth plan individually. So the only one you can block is yourself. And also this brought dynamic, because there is the understanding, if you want to have the benefits of the single market, do your homework and don't get into conflicts with the others. Indeed, to the second question, it is a merits-based process, and it will stay a merits-based process. Of course, the more candidate countries are moving forward, the better it is, but there is a difference in speed and achievements. So we will see in the very end, but I think we should very clearly stick to the principle that it is a merits-based process.
Chancellor Scholz, Taiwan has put its military on high alert because of military exercises by China, which are, according to China, targeted at any kind of attempt of gaining independence. How concerned are you about that, and how are you proposing you and your European partners react? And Madam President, the United States has announced new sanctions against Iran, against its oil sector. Is the European Union planning anything similar, and if yes, when?
Wir haben eine klare Politik.
We pursue clear policies as far as Taiwan is concerned. This remains unchanged. We take a close look and monitor closely. For us, it is clear we assume that no one tries to change the situation between Taiwan and the People's Republic of China by the use of force, but of course we will continue to monitor closely.
Council took a decision on sanctions on Iran. The reason is that Iran is supporting Russia's drone and missile terror against innocent civilians in Ukraine. The daily killing and the death of innocent people that we see would not be possible without the supplies and the supply lines by Iran. And therefore, these sanctions against Iran are sending a very clear message. Contributions to terror and Russia's illegal war of aggression have serious consequences.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin, Herr Bundeskanzler. Es kommt ja nicht so häufig.
Madam Commission President, Federal Chancellor, I would like to take this opportunity and ask a more fundamental question pertaining to your cooperation. In recent times, we've seen divisions also when it comes to punitive tariffs on vehicles. What does this mean? You could also call it a dispute. What does this mean for your future cooperation? And Madam von der Leyen, how confident are you that by the end of the month you will come to a solution with China for these punitive tariffs not to enter into force?
Fragend.
Well, by asking a question about something, you're not necessarily turning it into a fact. We are on the phone very often with each other, and we used the technological means at our disposal to stay connected. And we do this in detail. It helps coordinate our policies. The questions I have to address and that we've talked about as a Chancellor are, of course, also subject of our discussions. I am hopeful that there will be an agreement by the end of October with China. Well, the cooperation is good, it is intensive, and indeed you may have different positions on certain issues, but we still continue to work for progress in Europe. We are talking
verhängt werden.
Countervailing duties. This is about injecting fairness, creating fairness for the production site Europe, that we establish a level playing ground and that those who access our markets do so under fair competition conditions and compete with others following those rules, and that we avoid distortions that result from the fact that outside of Europe subsidies are being granted to the producers. We are negotiating with China. We are negotiating about the kind of countervailing to be granted. This is would be possible through price commitments. It's one of the options. These are things that are being put on the table, and negotiations end once the last bit has been negotiated. It's important to make the point that these negotiations can also continue beyond that date at which the countervailing duties would come into force. This is important. The negotiation process does not stop abruptly the minute the countervailing duties take effect or come into effect, but that the negotiating process can also continue beyond that date. Important is our objective to ensure that the subsidies are being in a way countervailed through in one way or another.
Gut, mein Lieber, damit ihr auch seht, dass wir in der Lage sind.